Greetings, fellow humans. I'm MartianBuu, and today I want to talk to you about the recent patch notes. While we didn't get any wild specific nerfs this time around, we did get a lot of standard nerfs that do affect wild. So, the dev comment. Our top priority this patch was to make the meta feel more stable and more diverse. For that reason, we focused primarily on making a moderate number of high confidence changes this patch. We expect that there will still be room for adjustment after this patch settles in, and we'd like to take the opportunity to see where these changes land before making further changes. First up, we have the long expected Guff change. The battle cry and hero power will no longer give you usable mana crystals. You'll have to wait until they fill the next turn. The dev comment is Ramp Druid is one of the most powerful and influential decks in the game this patch. Guff was the clear power outlier for this deck, so a change to Guff was the highest confidence change we can make. We still expect Guff to be a playable card with an important role in these strategies, but we hope that the change will make it feel like there is more of a cost to ramping than there was previously. I'm a little disappointed personally, not because I don't think that this is a good change, but because I was really hoping to get a mana nerf for Guff. Just because if he costs 6 or more, then I could run Captured Coldtooth Mines to tutor him over the Cthulhu pieces. So with this, I feel like that dream is dead. I don't think they're ever going to adjust his mana with a change this significant. The empty mana crystals matter a lot. This affects when you can ramp. So it used to be that, for example, I want to use Solar Eclipse Branching Paths, which cost 6 mana, and you'll have 7 mana after doing this. So you could get that ramp in and still do your big defensive play. So that is going to matter a lot. It's not going to kill the card. I think it's still going to be extremely playable. It's still going to be the centerpiece of all of the Druid decks that get played in Wild right now, but this change is going to matter a lot. Next up, we have Edwin Defias Kingpin going back to 4. The dev comment is, there's been a lot of attention to Edwin ever since he was buffed in the last patch, and rightfully so. Since his buff, he has been one of the most highly played and winningest cards in the game, which made him an obvious candidate for a high confidence adjustment to Rogue. When we made the initial buff, Rogue looked like it needed some help, but now that these lists have been more refined, we think Rogue will remain a player in the meta even with the Edwin back to 4. Miracle Rogue has been surprisingly strong in Wild recently. I imagine that this nerf is going to matter a lot, but the card was already fantastic at 4. Like, it wasn't like a bad card that needed to get buffed to be good. It got buffed to kind of push Rogue archetypes in Standard. So going back to 4 will still be good in pretty much every deck that it was good in before, except maybe Pirate Rogue. At 3, Pirate Rogue started to play it, but I doubt it stays in the deck at 4. Magister Dawngrass hero power is going from Honorable Kill, gain +2 damage, to Honorable Kill +1 damage. Nightcloak Sanctum is going from 3 durability to 2 durability. The dev comment is, along with Druid and Rogue, Mage has been one of the most dominant classes since the patch. Nightcloak Sanctum has been a clear outlier in the mid stages of the game, and the scaling threat of Magister Dawngrass hero power has been the dominant... Oh, I read that right. Has been the dominant in the endgame. These 2 standout cards are the most obvious targets for tuning down the deck's power level and should also make the class less frustrating to play against in the mid and late game. These changes don't really affect Wild that much. I think in either case you played those cards because you really wanted to, in which case I think you still do. Defend the Dwarven District is going from requiring 2 spells in the beginning to requiring 3 spells. Dev comment is, Quest Hunter is a frustrating deck to play against and was poised to be a powerful meta contender after the changes to the other classes. This change is both to address the deck's current state and anticipated relative power level after the patch. Quest Hunter hasn't been the meta player it was back in Fractured and Alterac for quite a while. It was still playable. You could win games with it. It was a fine deck, but wasn't very popular, wasn't oppressive whatsoever. This nerf is going to hurt it, so the low play rate is probably going to go to a no play rate. I don't mind that. Kael'thas Sinstrider is going from 6 mana to 8 mana. This nerf is gigantic. Dev comment is, Kael'thas, Bran, and Denathrius have appeared together as a package in a variety of decks. To address the specific interaction between these 3 cards, we felt the best solution was to add 2 more costs to Bran Kael'thas combo, so that they can't be played with 10 mana. We prefer to change Kael'thas over Bran because Kael'thas being used primarily for things like this combo, while Bran has other interesting use cases too. Real shame that the option, if they were going to address Bran, would be to change Bran instead of just Hall of Faming it early. It makes it so much less exciting when Wild cards go back to Standard because of the precedent that they're going to nerf them rather than just put them back into Wild where they're fine. That aside, this change destroys Kael'thas. It's not going to be a card anymore. It'll be interesting to see when this rotates to Wild. Will they unnerf it? Because the last time they unnerfed a Kael'thas, it went like disastrously. But this card isn't old Kael'thas, right? Like this card is fine for wild, and old Kael'thas was ridiculous. A free minion is very different than a free spell. So we'll see. Hopefully we get this back, because I thought it was kind of cool and wild, but that's a long time away. Smothering Starfish is going from 3 mana to 4 mana. The dev comment is, Smothering Starfish was living up to its name a bit too much. The goal for this card was for it to be a strong tech card, but the cost to include it in your deck was low enough that it was acting more like a staple than a tech card. While responding to specific meta forces, Starfish was also unintentionally snuffing out a variety of underrepresented decks. We think this adjustment will allow Starfish to be used as a powerful tech option, but will make it less generically ubiquitous. I was irrationally bitter about this card when it was released. I knew I was overreacting, so I had to like cool it and come back later to have comments on it. Neutral board-wide silence is crazy to me. Like, we learned a long time ago how efficient silence minions can disqualify a lot of otherwise really fun cards from seeing any play just because they get silenced and they're pointless. The nerf to Ironbeak Owl and the Hall of Faming of Spellbreaker. Even the Druid exclusive one got nerfed, and this is the best one that's ever been printed. It's like it cost 3, it had really decent stats, and it silenced everything. So while you have your own thing that you care about, that goes too, it also unfreezes your board while getting through taunts and stuff. It's so efficient. When I saw this at 3, I was really frustrated, to be honest. I didn't feel like I should have been. Like I knew like I was overreacting, but eventually I coped down a little bit, and while the type of things that this disqualifies don't really pop up anyway, just because of the nature of the format. So this didn't really ruin my time, but it's funny that it's getting nerfed anyway, you know? I would have never expected to see a nerf to this card, but I do think it's deserved. Like 2 mana Ironbeak Owl, I think is a more balanced effect than this. I do think silence is a good effect to have access to. I just don't think it should be like a really cheap, all classes get it, and all silence effect. So good change. On to some buffs. School Teacher is going from a 4-3 to a 4-4. The dev comment is, when we initially changed School Teacher, it was the most played card in the game. We are partially reverting the balance change in order to make the card feel a bit better to include in decks, while still acknowledging that its power level at launch was a bit higher than we would have liked it to be. Still don't understand why it was nerfed. Don't really understand why it doesn't go back to the full stat line now. It saw a lot of play, but it was like a new card, right? So I remember Azure Drake getting Hall of Famed back in the day. That card saw too much play. It made it too hard to print a 5-drop that was worth playing just because the bar was set so high with Azure Drake. So they rotated it to have a little bit more diversity. And that makes a lot of sense to me because at the time, Azure Drake was believed to be eternal. It was always going to be in Classic, so rotating it out to increase variety in Standard made a lot of sense to me. In this case, I never really felt like it was oppressive. It was a played card. It was a really fun card. And it wasn't like oppressively powerful or anything, much like Azure Drake in that respect, although I think it's a little bit more fun than that. But it's a standard card, you know, like it's going away. Maybe they don't want this to dominate the 4 slot for the next couple years. I'm sure that they wouldn't do this without having put a lot of thought into it, but I think it could have gone back to full stats. Nevertheless, at least it got a little bit of health back. Maybe it'll be good enough. Somehow, I doubt it. That's to say for standard. It's certainly not going to see any play in wild. Finally, we have Alliance Bannerman. Was nerfed to 1 health only and is now going back to 2 health. The dev comment is, when we buff cards in underperforming classes, we rarely do it with the goal of immediately shooting the class to a 50% plus win rate. Our goal is to make the game more fun, something we can accomplish by bringing the class up to a level where players feel like there's something worth exploring. With the focus on high confidence changes in the patch, the change we were most confident we could give Paladin was something we've seen before. A reversion to a previous balance change. Bannerman still saw a lot of play after the health went down. I don't know. As far as wild, I think what this affects the most is you can't get this off of Salhet's Pride anymore. Having the extra health will be helpful sometimes, and I don't think that this getting tutored by Salhet's Pride really matters that much, but hand buff isn't really a thing in wild, and I don't think that this is going to tilt it in either direction. Maybe this becomes a better card for Reno Paladin if that pops up again. So that does it for the patch notes. One notable exclusion for me is Theotar Mad Duke. I feel like could have been changed, but I'm not sure whether or not I want it. It is a pretty polarizing card. I'm sure when I say that, like, maybe I want a Theotar nerf, depending on what kind of gamer you are, you're either appalled at me or excited that I would say such a thing. For me, with Theotar, it feels really bad to have it played against me, but the overall effect it's had on Wild, I think, is a very positive one. So it's just a matter of, do the ends justify the means? Card games are fun because of planning and executing strategies. So if you have a card in your hand that you've built your deck around, that you've been trying to set up for the last like 2 or 3 turns, and then that just kind of gets ripped out of your hand without you having any opportunity to prevent it, it feels really bad. Regardless of how good it may or may not be for the game, the card itself feels awful to have it played against you. When you hit something exciting, it's very fun. But I do really like how much of my collection I've been able to use these past few weeks. And I attribute that like 70-30 to Theotar and Renathal, respectively. Theotar forces players to run multiple win cons in their deck, and so it's a lot harder to play an all-in early combo deck and get away with it, because Theotar being in a lot of decks means it just gets ripped out of your hand. So it's nice that those decks are harder to play and the populations of those decks are down, but the population of Theotar, like ripping cards out of your hand and making it impossible to really plan out your turns, is really high. So it's a trade-off. Honestly, I do not know how I feel about the card. I don't know if I think that it's good for the game or bad for the game. I don't know if I want to change to it. I think I won't know until there is a change to it. But that would be the change that I was expecting and didn't hit this patch. So I imagine it'll get something eventually. We'll have to see. Let me know in the comments what you thought of these changes, what changes you would have liked to see. Let me know if you thought my takes were all terrible. Remember to like and subscribe for more Martian videos. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.